My name is Topher, and this is my journey through addiction and recovery. If I can save you the 5, 10, 15 years of just brutal hell that drugs and alcohol really brought to my life, that's what I'm here to do, just by sharing my story and sharing my experience and sharing that there is strength and there is hope and there's a way out. Give yourself that gift. At 16 years old, fairly late blooming, I tried my first drink. I was at a friend's house and her mom asked if I had ever drank alcohol before. I really had never experienced something like that, but it felt like a safe environment for me. So I was like, oh, okay, this should be okay. She gave me my first drink. A few months later, a friend of mine from high school introduced me to a lighter drug, and went over to her house. She invited me to try it. I said, what the heck, I'll give it a try. Little did I know that I would graduate from the smoke and the drink on to harder and harder drugs until eventually into college, and in my first relationship, I just kind of went buck wild. I tried anything and everything that anyone would really offer me because it was like, what the heck? It's a new experience. At the time, it didn't really seem that scary. I hadn't really seen, at that time, the darker the darker end of things. The thing that attracted me was the fact that I no longer had to be in the present. I was like pressing pause, and I was seeking escape from the things that I was experiencing at the time. Whether it be, feeling like the odd man out, feeling like I didn't belong, or that I didn't really have a group of friends that I identified with. And by labeling myself someone who did this and did that, whatever it may be, substances, alcohol, it gave me a sense of belonging. But little did I know that sense of belonging would then become a category for perpetuating the rest of my addiction, with that being my sole identity. It set me on a trajectory to where I was waking up under an overhang on a building on the corner of Hollywood and Highland, my outdoor apartment, but it wasn't so nice and it wasn't so luxurious. That continued for almost 4 years, about 3.5 years. I was slave to this thing that I couldn't control. Every waking moment, I was motivated by, how can I find my next drink? How can I find my next drug? How can I find that high that I once got? And, if this is the first time you've heard this, it's really hard, if not impossible, to actually experience what you experienced that first time. And, but that's what led me on the chase. And, I hadn't realized just how far I had given up until, a year or 2 years into wandering aimlessly around Los Angeles and around Hollywood, seeking any escape from my mind and from the things that kept me up at night. The shame, the guilt, the pressure, anxiety, and just the general depression and hopelessness that I had that time. And I didn't really think about who I was hurting. I thought selfishly that the only person that I was affecting was myself, and that anyone that thought it was them was selfish and didn't understand where I was coming from or what I was dealing with. It was something that only I was, able to experience, and only I was able to suppress. That summer in 2018, I had been hospitalized on 5150s, 5250s, with psychosis, drug-induced psychosis, and it left me completely broken. I had no more mind to lose. After waking up one day on the streets of Los Angeles, after being homeless for nearly 4 years, on and off, intermittently and chronically, I understood that it all started with that beer, and it all started with that hit. And, me being me, I wasn't able to stop. I used it as a tool to identify myself. I used it as a tool to escape my unwillingness to self-reflect and to get to understand what I was feeling and get to understand why I was feeling what I was feeling. In the summer of that year, I was associated with a program that had facilitated a motel for me to live in temporarily. And on one of my runs, I was up for days, probably about a week, without food, without water, without sleep. I had ridden my mind and my body into the ground. And I called the front desk while laying in my bed, like experiencing heart palpitations and feeling like my mind was just a blur, and it was a buzz with whatever it was that I was experiencing. And I called them and asked, if they could call an ambulance. Little did I know, I couldn't even verbalize those requests. I couldn't say what I needed to say because I was just so far gone. Needless to say, the ambulance still showed up. The EMTs looked at me and they said, well, we don't know what's wrong with you because you can't tell us right now, but we're still going to take you to the hospital. They put me in the back of the ambulance, and on the way to the hospital, to the ER, I experienced several grand mal seizures. According to the ER reports, I had flatlined and I was just in oblivion. And they were able to resuscitate me. And several hours later, I woke up to both of my parents standing in front of me. And my mom just looked me in the eyes with tears, just rolling down her face. And she told me that, she asked me, she said, do you know what happened last night? Were you aware of what happened last night? And I was like, I'm in the hospital. What do you mean? I know I'm here. And she had told me that just an hour before I woke up, that a young man not too far from my age was in the hospital bed directly to my side. And he had just succumbed to a drug overdose. And his mother was there. And my mom just said, I can't get her wailing out of my head. And she just looked at me just devastated and just said, I can't have you be that. I can't. I don't know what I would do. And that's when it hit me that my idea of giving up wasn't working. And I had to give in. I had to give in to something new. So at that point, I realized that I had to give up giving up because I had so few other options. Relapse is a part of my story. I wasn't able to stay away from anything and everything, but luckily I was able to put down hard drugs in August of that year. And finally, the first half of December in 2018, I took my last drug, and I I literally had no more options. So I checked into rehab later on that month. And I remember in rehab, I had this roommate that I slept in a bunk next to. And just being able to have those conversations with him and be in a group setting with other people who are experiencing that same ordeal. I came to realize that I wasn't completely lost. Without the guidance that I received and without the love and support that I had, I don't know where I would be. I had tumbled down just mountains of regrets and past mistakes and shame and guilt, and I found every excuse to try to keep myself from having to experience that by ingesting whatever I could to make me not be here. I finally realized through the guidance of my first sponsor, he taught me something that to this day I still hold very dear. And it was that the drinks and the drug were not my issue, were not my problem. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? I was addicted to these drugs. It wound me up on the streets. I had done anything and everything I could do to possibly attain what I thought I required at that moment. And he told me, no, it's not the drinks and the drugs that are the problem. The problem was always you. And the temporary solution, the antidote to yourself, was that drink and was that drug. And that opened my mind to realizing that I was seeking an antidote that was just perpetuating a problem. So I needed a new solution. And coming to the realization that there was more beyond my addiction and there were options for me that I thought were forever lost. Ultimately, I found a blessing in surrendering. Over the next 3.5 months in rehab after getting that sponsor, I learned numerous things from, just how much I cared and loved humor. They say laughter is the best medicine. At that point, it was definitely, it was a much better drug, for sure, and a lot less consequences. And leaving rehab, checking into a sober living, and just surrounding myself once again with a community of people who had a similar experience. It was a camaraderie I hadn't really experienced before. And it led me to today where, they say this a lot, like, I don't know, in the rooms they say this a lot, which is like, I have a life beyond my wildest dreams. If you or someone you know deals with addiction or alcoholism or substance abuse in some form, there are resources available and there are people who care. There'll be several listed here on the website. So if there's any advice I can leave for you, it's to not give up. The way that I had defined giving up was giving in to the instinct of escape. And you deserve better.